My mother wanted to erase me because I became a soldier, then she wanted to come back to me. My name is Delia. I'm 24 years old and currently serving in the military. This is something I never thought I'd be sharing so publicly, but I think I need to. There's too much inside me that hasn't been said out loud. Too many moments I thought I could bury, too many things I tried to forgive without actually healing from them. I was born when my mother, Marigold, was just 16. According to what she's told me, what little she's actually shared about that time, her parents didn't give her much of a choice. They refused to let her get an abortion, said it was against everything they believed in. I guess that made me the embodiment of a mistake she had no power to avoid. It's something I've always felt, even if she never said those words out loud. Still, I won't pretend she didn't try. Marigold worked hard. She raised me on her own, without help from my father, who was stationed overseas for much of my early life. She did everything a teen mother could, held down 2 jobs at times, finished her schooling, kept food on the table even if it wasn't always a full meal. I never went hungry, technically. But I remember the sting of opening my lunchbox and seeing the same sandwich, dry and basic, while the other kids had full meals with chips and juice and tiny treats packed in love. My toys were hand-me-downs or from thrift stores. I had a teddy bear that Marigold bought for me from a local discount shop. I loved that bear more than anything else, because it was mine. Even as its stuffing wore thin and one of its button eyes disappeared, it was my only real comfort. Sometimes I think I loved it so much because I knew, even then, that love from people wasn't always reliable. We lived in a small house that Marigold inherited from her grandmother. It wasn't much, but it had character. My room was tiny, with floral wallpaper peeling at the corners, and a rickety bookshelf that barely held my books upright. But I called it home. I saw myself growing up in that house, maybe even raising a family there someday. I didn't know then that I'd eventually become invisible inside those walls. When I turned 18, I had the opportunity to go to college. It was a huge deal. I had worked so hard to get there. But I chose a program connected to military service, a decision that wasn't entirely mine. My father, Ruben, had helped arrange it. Even though he hadn't been there much growing up, he began reaching out to me during my teen years. He said the program would help with tuition and give me a solid future. I believed him. It was my way out and a path to independence. Marigold didn't take it well. She said very little the day I left. And then, silence. 4 months. No calls. No messages. No care packages. I tried reaching out at first, but her replies were cold, distant. Eventually, they stopped entirely. It wasn't until my graduation, when I officially joined active service, that she finally reached out again. By then, everything had changed. She had married her longtime boyfriend, Glenn, and together they had a daughter. They were expecting another child soon. She lived in that same house, but it wasn't the same anymore. Not to me. Even though she tried to rebuild things between us through short phone calls, there was a gap neither of us knew how to cross. A part of me wanted to bridge it, but another part, one I didn't know how to silence, felt deeply wounded. Every glance at her social media confirmed what I feared: I was gone from her life in every meaningful way. Every photo, every memory she shared online was about her new family, her husband, her little girl, her pregnancy. There was no trace of me. Not a single photo of us on the walls. Not even one from my childhood. A cousin of mine, Loretta, sent me a video she had come across. It was from Glenn's YouTube channel, a private walkthrough of their home after recent renovations. I watched it 3 times. My old room was painted over, redesigned for their second child. My things were gone. My bookshelf replaced. The closet now filled with tiny baby clothes and storage bins. It looked like I had never lived there. I cried that night. Quietly, alone. I tried to tell myself it didn't matter. That I was strong, that I didn't need a room to prove I belonged somewhere. But the truth is, I wanted to feel like I still had a home. That I hadn't just been replaced. And then came the call that reopened everything. It was 2 days ago. Marigold asked when I'd be coming home to visit the family. Her voice was soft, almost hopeful. I told her, with as much restraint as I could manage, that her house hadn't been my home in over 6 years. I said I'd be staying with Ruben on base during my next visit. That's when she mentioned that I hadn't even met my younger sister. I didn't ask why. I asked why she would even want me to. I told her that it felt like she had erased every sign of me so she could have a second chance with a new family. That stung her. I could hear her start to cry before she abruptly ended the call. Later, I told my fiancé, Harland, about it. He listened, then quietly said that maybe I had been too harsh. That my mom was at least trying to reconnect. Ruben, too, weighed in. He said I should try to be thankful that Marigold gave me a roof over my head and made sacrifices, even if she made mistakes along the way. Maybe they're right. Maybe I should just say I'm sorry. But it doesn't feel that simple. After the call ended, I sat in silence for a long time. Not angry. Not crying. Just still. It was strange how hollow everything suddenly felt. Like the space I had created in my heart for healing had closed itself off again. The truth is, I never meant to go into the military to spite anyone. I didn't even do it to be brave. I did it because it felt like the only real option I had. My grades were good, but not scholarship level. My family had no money for college, and even the idea of student loans made me nervous. Ruben, my father, had been sending support for a few years by then. He wasn't around when I was younger, but as I reached my mid-teens, he started calling more often, sending small gifts and sometimes money. It wasn't perfect, but it felt like something. He was the one who suggested the program. Told me about the benefits, tuition, training, housing, structure. I think, deep down, I just wanted to feel like someone believed in me. That someone had a plan for me. So I signed up. Marigold saw it as betrayal. She always hated the military. Never really said why until much later. She just shook her head when I told her, said, "I can't watch you do this." And she meant it because she didn't. Once I left, it was like I vanished. She didn't answer my texts. She never asked how I was doing. Not when I completed basic training. Not when I passed my first physical fitness assessment. Not when I got my first official assignment. 4 years of silence. When I was 22, Ruben came to my graduation. I remember scanning the crowd, hoping somehow that she would surprise me and show up. She didn't. I smiled for the camera anyway. I didn't hear from Marigold until a month later. She sent a short message that said, "I heard you're in the service now. I hope you're safe." That was it. A part of me wanted to ignore it, but I couldn't. I wanted to believe it was a sign that she missed me, maybe regretted pushing me away. We started talking on and off. At first, it was polite. Civil, small updates. She told me she'd gotten married to Glenn and that she had a daughter now, Minna. She said they were thinking of moving but had decided to renovate the house instead. She never asked to see me, never suggested I visit. Still, the calls became more regular. I convinced myself that maybe we were healing. That maybe the wound would close if I just gave it time. Then I followed her on social media. At first, I just wanted to see what my little sister looked like. Marigold rarely sent pictures. But the more I looked, the more I realized there were no signs I had ever existed. Dozens of family photos, birthday parties, holidays, even casual Sunday afternoons. But I wasn't in a single one. No throwbacks. No look how far we've come. It was like I had been removed from the story. The renovations made it worse. My cousin Loretta, who I mentioned earlier, had been invited to help out with the project. I wasn't. She later sent me a video. Glenn had filmed a walkthrough of the newly finished house. It was beautiful. Polished floors. Updated kitchen. New light fixtures. And then the camera turned to what had once been my room. The wallpaper was gone. The old shelf replaced. My bed, my desk, the tiny corkboard where I had pinned drawings as a kid had gone. Instead, the room had been redone in soft yellows, with a crib and plush rugs. Minna's new nursery. Loretta had added, "I just thought you should see it." I watched it twice. Then I deleted it. I didn't want to know how long it had taken to erase me. I didn't say anything to Marigold right away. I told myself maybe it wasn't intentional. Maybe she just wanted to start fresh. But that didn't explain why there weren't even any old family photos tucked into a hallway or a dusty frame on a side table. Why even the pictures I had sent her, like the one of me in my uniform, weren't anywhere to be seen. It began to affect how I saw myself. Like, if I disappeared tomorrow, would anyone even notice? Would anyone walk through that house and say, "Delia used to live here"? That brings me back to the recent phone call. The one where she asked when I was coming home. I couldn't help myself. The words just came out, "That house hasn't been my home for a long time." I told her I'd be staying with Ruben. She sounded surprised, almost hurt. She reminded me that I hadn't met Minna. I said, "Why would you want me to? You've erased me so you could have a second chance." She cried. I didn't. After I hung up, I told Harland. He didn't say much at first, but later he said maybe I should consider apologizing. That maybe I'd been too harsh. I thought about that. Then Ruben called and told me, in his usual gentle way, your mother gave everything she had. Don't judge her for not having more. Maybe they're both right. But there's something about being made to feel like you never mattered that apology doesn't fix. Later that week, Loretta called about the wedding. She's going to be my maid of honor, and her daughter Alma is going to be my flower girl. I'm keeping things small, simple. Just one of each. She told me she was flying out next week to help finalize details, and we made plans to meet up. Not long after, Marigold called again. She had spoken to Loretta and found out about the trip. She asked if she could come with her. Her voice cracked when she said she knew she had hurt me and that maybe this was the best chance we'd have to make things right before I started a family of my own. I told her I needed time to think about it. I barely slept that night. I dreamt about things I didn't want to, about being in that old room again, about having that teddy bear in my hands, but hearing a baby crying somewhere else in the house and knowing it wasn't me anymore. That it was someone else's turn to be loved. I woke up exhausted. I know a part of me wants to say yes. To try. But there's another part that still feels like the door she closed never truly reopened. I'm scared to walk through it again only to find it shuts behind me once more. And yet, I keep answering her calls. A day after I told Marigold I needed to think, I called her. I said she could come out for the wedding planning weekend, but not with Loretta and Alma. I didn't want it to feel like a family vacation. I needed it to be different. Quiet. Honest. She didn't argue. In fact, she sounded hurt. But she tried not to show it. She asked if there was another time we could meet before the wedding, and I told her the only free weekend I had was the 14th. She hesitated. Said Glenn had a business trip that weekend and she didn't want to leave Minna alone. I told her I understood, but that it was the only time I could offer. It was her choice. She said she'd think about it. That weekend, Loretta and Alma arrived. When we sat down to go through wedding plans, Loretta surprised me. She had brought a box of old photos and portraits. She admitted most of them had been tucked away in a closet at Marigold's house. Even the picture of me in my uniform. She pulled it out, still in the same frame I had mailed it in. It was dusty, but intact. I didn't expect it to hit me so hard. I cried. Right there at the kitchen table. Loretta wrapped her arms around me and didn't let go until I stopped shaking. Alma looked up at me with wide eyes and said, "Soldiers don't cry." I laughed. I couldn't help it. I was still in uniform when she said it, and I guess she expected I'd be too tough for that sort of thing. We spent the rest of the day picking photos for the wedding slideshow. I found pictures I didn't even remember. We had one of me and Marigold at a local fall fair, both of us eating caramel apples with sticky faces. One of me asleep on her lap when I was 5. Another from a school project, standing proudly beside a volcano made of paper mache. I had almost forgotten that girl. Loretta offered to store the rest until my place was ready. I agreed. That night, Marigold called. She said Glenn's trip had been cancelled and asked if she could still come. I said yes. She booked the flight right away. I don't know what I expected the day she arrived, but I didn't expect to feel so many things at once: dread, hope, confusion, sadness. I was still in uniform when I met her at the restaurant. I hadn't had time to change after duty. Maybe that was symbolic. Maybe that was fate. She was already sitting at the table when I arrived. She stood up when she saw me, nervous, arms open like she didn't know if I'd want the hug or not. I didn't hesitate. I hugged her. Hard. The way I used to before I left. For a second, it felt like I had gone back in time. We ordered food but barely touched it. After a few minutes of silence, I blurted out the question that had been on my mind for years. Why did you hate me joining the military so much that you just cut me out of your life? She looked startled, like she didn't expect me to ask it so directly. She fumbled with her fork and said, "Can I order first?" I let her. But I didn't let go of the question. Eventually, she answered. Her voice was low and trembling. She told me that when she was a child, her favorite uncle came home from the Gulf War and was never the same. He hurt her emotionally, physically. It changed everything. She said it felt like the person she loved died over there and someone else came back in his place. Her parents didn't protect her. Didn't believe her. Didn't stop him. When I told her I was joining the military, she said, it felt like history repeating itself. She imagined me or Ruben dying, or worse, coming back as strangers. She panicked. And instead of protecting me, she shut down. She said, I thought if I didn't talk to you, I wouldn't lose you. But that's exactly what I did, isn't it? I nodded, but I couldn't say anything. My throat had tightened. So I stuffed food in my mouth and changed the subject, sort of. I told her I hated her parents. For what they did to her. For what they allowed. And that it felt like, after everything, she stopped loving me. That she let those memories decide who I could be in her life. She said she never stopped loving me. That I was still her baby. I asked her why, if that was true, she never put up a single photo of me in the house. Why she never invited me to her wedding. Why she didn't even think I'd want to help paint the nursery or pick out baby names. I looked at her and said, that house was supposed to be mine. You inherited it, and I thought someday I would too. But it's not mine anymore. It's someone else's. That little one you're having, that's the closest I've ever been to your new life. Just sitting across from it, watching. I used the phrase again. Your do-over family. She flinched. Tears welled in her eyes, and for a second, I thought she might stand up and leave. But she didn't. She looked down at her hands. I asked, why wasn't I good enough to be part of it? People around us had started looking. I felt embarrassed, so I stood up and said I wanted to leave. She asked if I'd come back to her room with her so we could talk in private. I didn't want to drive. I didn't feel like I could. So I agreed. When we got back to her hotel, we sat on the bed. I tried to talk, but instead I broke down. The crying wasn't quiet or gentle. It was guttural. Uncontrolled. I told her. I missed you. You replaced me. You weren't there when I got engaged. I kept hoping you'd call, just once. I started hyperventilating. I couldn't stop. She made me drink water, then pulled me down onto the bed and let my head rest on her lap. She rubbed my hair and kept humming something under her breath. I think it was one of those lullabies she used to sing. I cried until I fell asleep. When I woke up later that night, the room was dark. She was still awake, still rubbing my hair. She was singing again, softly, in Macedonian. I didn't move. I just listened, pretended I was still asleep so she wouldn't stop. Eventually, I drifted off again. The next morning, I woke up to find myself holding onto her. Arms wrapped around her waist like I used to when I was little. For a few seconds, I let myself forget the years between us. But the ache came back quickly. And the tears followed. We spent the day together, breakfast, errands, a walk around the lake. It felt normal. Like we were trying to pick up something we dropped and couldn't quite carry the same way anymore. That evening, back at the hotel, we talked again. This time, it was her turn to cry. That night, we sat on the edge of the bed, and Marigold finally opened up in a way I never expected. She admitted that cutting me off had been the worst mistake of her life. That back then, she thought she was punishing me for what she believed was a betrayal. But in truth, she had been reacting out of fear and grief she never really processed. She said the moment I told her I was going into the military, she couldn't stop seeing her uncle's face. Couldn't stop remembering how someone she loved had been turned into someone she feared. She said she never meant to replace me. That she didn't even realize how deeply she had hurt me until I broke down in front of her, crying like I did that night. She said it reminded her of how she used to cry after her parents refused to listen, after her body was scarred by things she should have been protected from. And for the first time, she said she saw herself in me in a way that broke her. She told me she didn't expect forgiveness. That she didn't even know if she deserved it. I didn't say much. I told her I needed time. That I didn't know if I could forgive her. That what happened couldn't be undone, and no conversation could give back those years. She nodded. She didn't argue. We didn't say much after that. But I stayed. I brushed my teeth, changed clothes, and quietly got into bed beside her. I hugged her one more time that night, unsure if I'd ever do it again. The next morning, I drove her to the airport. We said goodbye like polite strangers, cordial, respectful, but quiet. I didn't cry. Neither did she. But my heart felt heavy for days after. I tried talking about it with my therapist, but with the wedding just weeks away, every session kept getting pulled back into seating charts, emotional checklists, and bridal stress. Still, in the back of my mind, that night with my mom never really went away. It was my therapist who finally pushed me to talk about it. She asked, was there anything about your mom's visit that you appreciated? And I realized, yes, there were things. When I had my breakdown, she comforted me like no one else ever had. She sang lullabies. She held me. And for a little while, I felt like her child again. We talked about that a lot, about how part of the pain wasn't just in what happened, but in what I missed. The protection. The comfort. The idea of a mother who would hold you no matter what. That week, we started virtual joint sessions with a trauma therapist. Marigold agreed immediately. She said, I want to fix what I can, even if I can't erase what I did. We had 3 sessions before the wedding. We resumed after my honeymoon. And while not every session brought clarity, they brought effort. They brought honesty. A week before the wedding, Marigold asked to meet me privately. We met at a 24-hour diner late in the evening, and she brought a small box. Said it had a few gifts that weren't for the party, just for me. The first was a small, old book. A collection of Macedonian lullabies. The same one she used to sing to me as a child. She said she remembered me talking about learning the language, and she wanted me to have them so I could sing them to my own children someday. She smiled and said, Minna never responds to lullabies. She just wants cartoons. But these always worked on you. The second gift took my breath away. She pulled out a folder with legal paperwork, old drafts from years ago, documents meant to add my name to the deed of her house. She told me that originally, she had planned to give me ownership if I chose not to enlist. But hearing what I said about the house not feeling like mine anymore, it made her realize she was wrong to ever withhold that. She said she wanted me to feel like I still had a home. That I hadn't been erased. When you're ready, she said, we'll talk to a lawyer. We'll update everything. If you don't want it gifted, I'll sell it to you. If you don't want it at all, that's okay too. But it's yours, if you want it. I didn't have words. Not then. I just nodded. I didn't know if I'd ever actually live there again, but knowing it was an option, it meant something I hadn't realized I needed. The final gift was strange, almost jarring. A small wooden box filled with copies of old photographs of my grandparents. Not the sweet, smiling ones. These were worn, faded photos pulled from the back of drawers. On top of the stack was a box of matches. Marigold said, I saw how angry you got every time we talked about them. I thought, maybe we could destroy them together. I didn't hesitate. We didn't go to a rooftop or make a dramatic ceremony of it. We just stood outside the diner in the gravel lot, one photo at a time, lighting each one and watching it curl into ash in an old tin can. There was something strangely cleansing about it. And then, the wedding came. It was everything I hoped it would be. No traditional military ceremony, but there were nods to it, my dress styled alongside my service jacket. I had checked with the base ahead of time. It was allowed. Harlan cried when he saw me. Loretta gave the sweetest toast I've ever heard. Alma was perfect with her little basket of petals. Marigold came, too. She sat quietly with Glenn and Minna, respectful of the space. She didn't try to be the center of attention. But she smiled. She helped where she could. And she stayed late. I caught her once during the reception just staring at one of the photo boards Loretta had put together. There was a picture of me in my uniform. She touched it gently and smiled, just before Minna tugged her away. We've continued therapy since then. We've talked about her childhood, about how the abuse she endured shaped how she mothered me, and later, how she feared she was becoming like the people who hurt her. She cried once, saying, when I saw you fall apart, I realized I'd hurt you the way they hurt me. And I never wanted to be like them. I told her she wasn't. Not really. They were cruel on purpose. She made mistakes, but she's trying to make them right. There's still distance between us. And I haven't told her I forgive her yet. But I think I will, someday. It took Ruben 6 years to earn my forgiveness. He was consistent. Patient. Present. I hope Marigold will be the same. I've learned that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean pretending the past never happened. It just means I'm choosing to move forward without carrying every wound with me. And if I ever need someone to hold me while I cry again, I think she would. Thank you for watching the video, like it if you watched the video to the end and don't forget to subscribe. Have a nice day.